Welcome in, group practice owners. It is 3 degrees here in Chicago for this winter, and we're going to be talking about an equally cold subject, which is marketing budget in private practice. So today, if you're joining us, I'm pretty confident that you did not learn all of the tips, tricks, and skills needed to successfully budget, understand your relationship between money and marketing, and where you should take all of this on a growing level, because it gets a lot harder the bigger you get or the faster you want to grow, because this is when cash is tight or bigger decisions have bigger impacts and small things become big things. And so today we're going to be teaching you the 8 fundamental skills you need to acquire, the 8 fundamental things that you need to understand about marketing, budget, and group practice, or general private practice. Even if you're solo here, it's all going to apply to really see success. Let's dive in today.
Yeah. The first thing you always need to consider is going to be your goals, guys. What is your goals for your practice? What is your budget? Everyone starts kind of in a unique place. So some of you guys are starting private practice and you have a lot of money saved up, or maybe you don't have a lot of money saved up, or maybe you have a lot of expenses. Like you decided that you wanted a really nice building, or you wanted to kind of like grow in and stepwise things. Everyone has different goals. Everyone has a different speed that they want to run their practice. Everyone has um, different employee costs, different vendor costs, and so on. And so you have to align your goals and be clear about your goals, clear enough that you can project effectively. Okay. You need
Yeah.
to be able to project yourself effectively here. And you need to really start being able to budget yourself effectively. And the first time that you do this, you're probably going to be wildly wrong, but I bet that you do this the second time and it starts working out really well. And so I think some people get really discouraged because they try to predict the first time and they're bad at it. They're bad at predicting, they're bad at projecting, they're bad at setting goals, they're bad at anticipating what one year looks like. But the most important thing here is to just do it again. Okay. Don't get discouraged and be like, my plans never work out anyway, so I may as well not do it. No, you just need to do it 2, 3, 4 times, and you're going to be like a lightning rod. Everything's going to hit. You know exactly what to expect. You know when to expect the pitfalls. You know when to expect the downside. You know when to expect the positives and the negatives. And so take some time to set your goals down. Take your time to take inventory of your current situation, and start creating this process for yourself.
Yeah. Within this, when you have an alignment on your goals, when you just have clarity of where you want to go, you have to understand that there's 3 types of marketing purchases. Typically, there are one-time purchases. These are or infrequent investments, things like a website build, maybe a street sign, some sort of brand update. Within that, you also often will have employee or vendor costs or contractor costs. And so this is anyone you're paying to do work, or often paying to help you get the marketing done on an ongoing basis or even on a one-time basis. And then you have the just ongoing expenses that aren't people, but this could look like software, like a CRM, your monthly Google ad spend, website hosting fees. So when you're trying to wrap your head around what we need to allocate on a marketing budget based off of our goals, we have to look at it through one-time costs this next year, employee or vendor costs, and then reoccurring costs that we're kind of stuck with based off of what we're trying to do. And I think the biggest mistake that we see here is that most often it's easier to say yes to larger one-time costs. You invest in a big brand update or a big training or a big website build, and you justify the 3, the 5, the $10,000. You justify this package of, oh, they'll build my Google ads for me and then I'll take it over at a later point or whatever it is. And so you'll spend more on the front end, but either it doesn't set up the ongoing system for success or over prioritizes cash, and it feels like you can say yes to it because maybe you dip into savings or it's not this reoccurring expense, which feels a lot scarier to say yes to hire that employee, to bring in that vendor or that contractor that's doing work for you monthly. And it's just the reversal of that mentality. Most of your marketing dollars needs to be spent in reoccurring activities, not in one-time events. And if you look at the last year and you ask yourself, great, where did most of my marketing money go? If it was mostly in larger purchases that were here or there, big SEO audit or whatever it is, then you probably need to rethink how the distribution of those dollars are going.
I think to make really great budgets here, we need to kind of consider a couple things. One is where you're at in revenue and where you're at
Yeah.
maybe in your own growth stage. So there's two big levers when it comes to building a marketing budget. It's that maintenance budgeting and then your growth budgeting. And
Yeah.
so it's oftentimes hard to say, hey, I want to grow this year. Like I want to grow my business. That oftentimes requires you to have maybe explosive new action that maybe you need to fail and make mistakes on or hire people and it was wrong or there different situations happen and growth plus profit oftentimes never coexist. Oftentimes when you're trying to grow, you're foregoing profits, you're foregoing freedom, you're foregoing
Yeah.
other elements that maybe you wanted to have in your business, but maybe it comes on the other side of growth. Okay. And so when we're looking at these two levers for your marketing budget, your maintenance budget, you base this based on how much you spend on your team size. Okay. So your team has sort of gas that it requires to move. Maybe gas for like a single person motorcycle is different than the gas that you would put inside of like a 200-person airplane, right? You need a lot more gas in that 200-person airplane than you need in that one person motorcycle. And it's because you're trying to move a much larger object or keep a much larger object in momentum. And so this is your maintenance budgeting. Okay. There's other budgets like the growth budget. This is that explosive bang that you need to get yourself to a point. And uh, it's kind of maybe like using some dynamite to break open a mountainside. You have to use this huge explosive force. It's a really big, powerful force to open up this cavity in the mountain. And then all of a sudden, you've got this cavity in the mountain that you can then go fill in and do whatever you need to do with, and then bring your maintenance budget up to that growth budgeting. And so when you're
Yeah.
thinking through your marketing and the budgeting for this, remember that your marketing is the lifeblood for your practice. Without new business, your business slowly fades away. Okay.
Right.
No matter how much we want to believe that if we do really great work, our clients will keep us afloat. It never works that way. It never works that way.
No.
There's always a point in time when you crest over the edge and you start diminishing. The day that someone comes to you is the first day that they start leaving you. Is a motto that I've held dear because it's true. The reality of it is true. No matter how good the results, no matter how much they love your therapist, no matter how much they advocate for you, it's impossible to keep a business alive without doing some type of marketing. Josh, I'll let you
Yeah.
dig into both of those a little bit more.
When we think about this second skill and really trying to decide, I think to unpack the maintenance budget versus the growth budget, you can determine your budget one of two ways. There's multiple ways to do it, but we think through this through, you could kind of look at it through your total revenue collection. This might be a better indication if you're in maintenance mode. So you're spending somewhere probably between 6 and 12% of your collected revenue on marketing activities. So if you have a $300,000 a year practice, spending 10% of that looks like spending about $30,000 a year on marketing. If you have a $1 million practice, right, you're going to spend about $100,000 a year on marketing and so forth at a 10%, which I believe is the Small Business Administration's like standard recommendation for small to medium-sized businesses. But that's more of just like a maintenance cycle for that business or revenue size. As Attilio was saying, if you want to grow faster than your current collections, my recommendation is you look through it through the lens of how many clinicians are on your team and how much money do you spend on marketing to keep those full, right? So let's say you have 10 clinicians and you spend $3,000 a month on marketing and they're all pretty much full. Well, that's about $300 a month per clinician on your team, give or take. And so if you're like, man, I want to add one more clinician on my team, Logic or back of the napkin math probably says you need to add another $300 a month. That's what it took to fill the rest of the clinicians. That's probably going to be vaguely what it'll take to fill the next one. If you want to add 10 clinicians to your team, you probably need to double your marketing spend. And now, not all costs scale evenly, right? We can go from $3,000 to $6,000 a month in Google ads with a click of a button versus if you hire a full-time community director inside of your organization, well, you might have to pay them 30K or 60K a year plus benefits. And that might not have this immediate ROI, but that's still translated out to kind of a marketing budget on an employee cost. So run some vague and rough numbers. And when you're thinking about how you're investing in marketing, there's probably kind of like a per clinician number we need to hit. Somewhere between $100 and $300 should be spent. To wrap this part up, another way to think about this is on average, a clinician, full-time clinician side of a practice can typically earn more than $100,000 in revenue for the practice based off of your average reimbursement rates. Definitely a lot more than that if you're all cash pay. Within that though, that means at minimum, if we want to like keep that single person's business running, we need to be spending $1,000 plus a year on marketing just for that single clinician, right? Or $100 a month on the floor. And that's in like best case scenario with some percentages. Often we see in this environment, it could be more than that. And then you also get bigger bangs for your buck in other places. And we're going to talk about that because it doesn't always scale evenly, right? You don't. So we'll dive into that. And that kind of brings us to skill 3 that you need to acquire, which is just conducting a cost benefit analysis and prioritizing high impact channels. I think a lot of practice owners aren't running the numbers and they aren't moving budget around, or they aren't keeping budget on the hottest area needed for their practice and their practice goals. It's, if you think about your stove in your house right now, you probably have 4 to 6 burners. One of them's the big burner typically that produces the most amount of heat. And then you've got a medium burner, maybe 2 of those, and then like a small burner, right? A simmer pot burner or something like that. Marketing's kind of the same way. In your different channels where you could invest dollars right now, there's actually some you can crank up way higher and others that will always be a simmer. Directory sites, at best, they are a simmer burner. There's other channels that you can prioritize that could have a much higher impact and ROI.
Yeah, I think the maybe reluctance or the unknowing of doing cost benefit analysis, I think comes from really basically just unrealistic expectations. So not knowing what to expect. And I think when you attempt to do something in marketing, I don't know if it's just that we live in a world where viral marketing exists and someone makes a post on social media and boom, they just their business is broken, right? And that's like the worst best problem in a business owner's world. But the fact is that never happens. Okay, it's viral, but maybe it needs to be called like lottery market, like something like that. It doesn't happen like that. Most businesses have to like baby inch up their progress, and you don't like to hear that, and you don't like to know that, and it's kind of like going out for a run for the very first time. You're bad at it. You're bad at it, and you get some benefit from it, but it takes you 2 weeks before you're even good at running enough that it's a workout enough for your body, that it's not just like, whatever. And so having realistic expectations will force you to do cost benefit analysis on each of your platforms. So let's say that you're investing time and energy in 2 or 3 different marketing strategies that you're actually like deploying fully, and you're getting the feedback, and you're able to say, great, we're getting these contacts from these sources. If you're able to deploy 1 or 2 strategies fully, oftentimes that's what group practices need to get to like multi locations. So it doesn't take a lot of effort or energy. You really just need 1 or 2 strategies that kind of just work for you. And what that means is that this cost benefit analysis is more to reduce what you're doing and find what's working. Just like I like the big burner analogy, crank up the burner for where you can. And so
Yeah.
find which channels allow you to crank up the burner So find what you're doing that allows you to crank up the burner, determine if it's being run effectively, or if it's not being run effectively, and then find new ways to inject more into that channel.
100%. And if you're looking for more content on what are those channels, some of those pieces, this is not the video to do a breakdown on high performing marketing channels in 2025 or beyond. Attend one of our upcoming workshops that talks about designing and delegating marketing and leading marketing, or go check out some of our other channels videos right now in terms of best practices for marketing and some of those things. I think the last piece under doing this analysis is it's your job as the practice owner to determine your budget and decide where more budget should go. And you can receive information from informed sources like your vendor with Google Ads, your partner with Google Ads saying, oh, if you spend more, we can successfully get more leads for you. But they can't do that without your approval. And if you sit back and you wait or you think or you don't consistently, weekly or monthly, decide where your money needs to go next, or where more of your money needs to go next, or less of, or some of those things, then this will never be as cyclical as you want. And that brings us to skill number 4, which is you have to learn how to optimize campaigns. And by campaign, I just mean any marketing work that you're doing in certain places, either by short-term ROI, medium ROI, or long-term ROI. When you go to the grocery store right now, you are buying food to consume today or this week, food to consume this month, and food to consume this year, right? And that's how you're allocating your money, right? Across your Costco trip and your Whole Foods and your Trader Joe's, right? And you have a blend of these purchases on a weekly, monthly basis to keep your house full with the food that you want and need. And marketing has different shelf life, right? Just like food has a different shelf life. And so you have to understand, and that's where we often see money, I'd say, go to waste inside of people making decisions for their practice, because they're overbuying for something that will last them shelf space wise the next year or the next couple of years. A website investment is a great example. Talk to a practice owner and like, oh, I need to do work on my website. I need to do work on my website. When we really come down to it, your website's more than good enough, and you're starving because that's a long shelf life item that doesn't need to be changed or updated or invested in, in terms of how it looks and feels on a weekly basis. And we've got nothing that's producing, right, food for today and this week. And we only have invested dollars into things that are like long shelf life. And so there's often just a mismatch of priorities, and you aren't moving money, right, to feed your team in the correct places.
Yeah. I think that if you're not able to categorize what you're doing into short, medium, or long term,
Mm, yeah.
um, you really need to ask yourself, and maybe just look it up online. Honestly, there's a lot of people who are really honest about how long things take, just on things like Reddit or whatever. So just like go online, read forums, and see, hey, if I do SEO work, how long should it take for me to get some kind of measurable results? And people will tell you,
Yeah.
well, it's going to be like, you know, 12 months. And then maybe all of a sudden you have to recategorize what you thought SEO was going to be a 3-month thing, or some vendor told you it was going to be, a month, and you'll start seeing results. Maybe you need to consider recategorizing it. And maybe that means you need to change how you're budgeting for it. Some
Yeah.
businesses, especially small businesses, can't afford to spend for long-term ROI things. Just
Yeah.
blanket. You just have to wait
100%.
to spend there. And so, and that's not like a
Yeah.
bad thing. It's
We
just when
waited
you're
for
coming up with
years.
budgets.
We
Yeah.
waited years to launch a website and to do search engine optimization because we could not afford any marketing dollars to go there until the business was big enough, because we're in a competitive enough space where we knew it was going to take 12 to 18 months to get any dollars back from the first day of work on SEO. And that is exactly what happened. It took us more than a year
Yeah.
to even reach a partial ROI on some of those things. And so every business, unless because we grew therapy flow by the speed of cash essentially as well, and like you have to be patient with certain things. Break this down kind of in our own business. We invest in ads to get ROI monthly. We invest in email marketing and search engine optimization now to get quarterly to, mid-annual return on investment. And then we invest in conferences and speaking and keynotes that I go attend and I spend a lot of time doing, that are 3 to 5 events a year. And they're kind of one-time big buckets and bumps each year for a yearly ROI and a brand lift there. And so that's how we've diversified, is probably the best way to put it, return on investment. Let's dive into skill number 5. And this is probably one of the most important ones on this entire list. This one and number 8 that we're going to get to in just a second. You have to track the key performance indicators of your marketing through the lens of this whole budget conversation. It's not just great which channels are performing, but there's a couple pieces. Number 1 is your cost per lead, your cost per acquisition, your cash conversion cycle, and your ROAS. We're going to go through each one of those really quickly. Attilio, why are we tracking cost per lead, especially per marketing channel?
This is the indicator for marketing success. So cost per lead, this is how much did you spend to get one person to say, hey, I'd consider working with you. Okay. So that's what cost per lead is. That's the effectiveness of marketing. And so each of your marketing channels has a little bit of context to it. And so you may see that you're doing marketing on social media and your cost per lead is $200. And you may see that you're doing Facebook ads and your cost per lead is $15. And you may see that you're running Google ads and your cost per lead is $60. And so you have different cost per leads per channel because there's different contexts involved. Now, cost per lead, like I said, it's the indicator for marketing success. This is how you need to reverse engineer. We use cost per lead as the first metric to say, we've got this many leads. Now we have this many at bats with sales for these
Right.
leads. And so how much is it actually costing us to get a new client through that channel? So cost per
Yeah.
lead, it's just a convenient number and it's really easy to get from most of your sources. There's going to be some channels that you don't spend dollars on, like Facebook ads or Google ads. That's maybe a little bit harder to calculate. You have to calculate using your time, really. And so like social media marketing, it's like, well, I took
Yeah.
6 hours this weekend to do all of my social stuff for the month. And so now that I did it all for the month in 6 hours, I know that it took me, maybe you're $100 an hour, set a rate for yourself, and then you've spent $600 a month for social media marketing. Okay. So
Yeah.
come up with
Another
sort of those
example
amounts.
for you larger practices is if you've hired a part or full-time like
Yep.
community director now, let's say you pay them $20 an hour. Well, take the last 6 months. Number 1 is if you don't have any systems in place that try and even vaguely track how many referrals you get from community partners. We've been releasing some great stuff inside of the CRM that can really help with that for those types of relationships. But when you start to track it, you might see, oh, on average, we're getting 15 referrals from other providers every month for the last 6 months. Okay, take all the money you spent on that director and managing that director, and then take how many leads on average you're getting monthly, add it all together, divide it out. You're going to kind of get an average cost per lead. Oh man, we spent 10 grand on this person in the last 3 months and we got 10 leads. Okay, well, that's about $1,000 cost per lead through that channel. It's probably going to be a lot better than that, especially if you do it correctly. That's just a raw example. And that leads us to cost per acquisition. So this is just a really important number. It's easy to calculate based off of your cost per lead, right? You generate 3 leads, one of them becomes a client. Well, that's your cost per acquisition, essentially, where you spent $10,000 in marketing in the last 3 months and you brought in 10 new clients, you have $1,000 cost per acquisition. Okay, that's a little high. How do we get that down? And so your different channels, just like they're going to have a different cost per lead, are going to have a different cost per acquisition. Google ads have a different intake close rate than community referrals, then listing sites, then organic SEO. And we just have to understand that and know that there's some benchmarks that we have to hit here. But I want to save our time to go to the most important one, which is the cash conversion cycle. This is something that no one else is talking about in the private practice space, and you really need to understand it if you want to scale your practice quickly while having cash constraint.
Yeah. The cash conversion cycle is all about uh, defining the nature of mental health services. And the nature of mental health services is that people come to you one time for an event and then they stick with you for a while. And so it's uncertain how long they'll stick with you for, which is maybe a little bit tough for some practice owners, maybe when they're first getting started to wrap their wallet around. But the cash conversion cycle really looks like if you get a new client and it takes you a week to turn that person from a stranger into a new client, and then they stick with you for 15 sessions, how much are they worth? How much are they worth to your practice? And how long did it take? How long did it take? So, cash conversion cycle, you can look at it as how long until you break even from the money that you spent. And you can also look at it as how quickly are you turning these individuals into new clients. And so when you come up with this, there's a linear relationship really between how much you're spending and how much they spend with you.
Yeah.
And essentially you just need to come up with this line where it intersects and you reach the 0 point. That's where you're at. That's where you're in balance, in a stable point. And anything beyond that, if they stay with you for anything longer than that tipping point, then you know that you're profiting on that client, and you know that you made a good business decision bringing them on. And so, cash conversion cycle here, guys, is all about determining how fast you can move when you're budgeting for yourselves. So if you can't calculate your cash conversion cycle, you'll never know how fast you can move. I was talking to a solo practice yesterday, or a small group, really small group, and they were like, "How I'm in between a rock and a hard place. I want to spend more on ads, but I can't afford it." And that's the hard truth: is that you have to wait. there's a waiting period until you recoup your money, and it's just because of the nature of mental health services. And I think so many people, I mentioned it earlier, want that like viral spark, that they just like make a post, it costs them nothing, and somehow their practice is full now. And that just doesn't happen. That it's not like that. And so I think we need to consider the realistic side of this, and that it takes time to recoup the money because your services are spread out. And yes, it's inconsistent. And yes, it's a little bit risky. And yes, there's a lot of problems with it, but that's the nature of the business that you're in.
Yeah. If you want to do this for yourself right now without even talking about investing future marketing, take your budget for the last any money you spent this last month or this last quarter, right? Let's say, again, for easy math, it's $10,000. Then look at how many new clients you got during that time period and how many sessions they had to do across all those new clients until it exceeded $10,000. You can run a slightly more complicated version of this where you layer in your fixed overhead costs and then your employment costs for your therapist to do the service delivery. And then you get not just a cash conversion in terms of revenue for the business, but profit conversion probably of how long does it take you to actually make a dollar that goes into your pocket as a practice owner from this. And that's really where you can make sure you're not overspending. So you could spend an entire video on doing this, but know that spend some time figuring this out for your practice, and it's going to unlock the ability for you to either be patient or grow faster than you think you can actually go right now, which is great. Um,
I'll
and then,
recommend too.
yeah, go ahead.
There is an ROI calculator on the Therapy Flow website. If you go to
Just
mytherapyflow.com and just go to resources up at the top, you'll see an ROI calculator. We've
yeah,
included a little super slick little graph that will show you if you put in your real numbers, or like roundabout, like near enough numbers, you'll be able to find a break even point for yourself, and that'll help you determine your cash conversion cycle.
definitely. And then last one is just return on ad spend. This is called ROAS in the marketing space, return on ad spend. And it's just a different version of sort of your cost per lead, your cost per acquisition. But it's helpful on a per channel of like, oh, we spent $1,000 in Google ads. Here's our bottom line return ROAS, two times ROAS, five times ROAS. Maybe it's just important for you to know this number if you like try and hire or work with a vendor, because this is often the language they use. And so it's kind of like if you heard the term KPI for the first time and you're like, what's a KPI? Similar, if you hear the term ROAS, you're like, what's a ROAS? It's return on ad spend, and that's measurement just for like ad spend heavy marketing channels. Let's get into skill six. Adjust your budget allocation across different marketing channels. This is fundamental for you as a leader. If you don't have a chief marketing officer doing this for you, maybe if you have an employee, maybe they're, doing this micro to the work that they're doing, right? If you work with a Google Ads vendor, they might adjust your budget across the different campaigns that they're running. But you as the practice owner have to adjust your budget, your overall investment based off of one of three things. You either need to invest more in the marketing channels that are working. You need to invest in fixing channels that are not working. So don't move on to other things until you've fixed channels that you're currently investing in. Or you need to launch new channels that might have a better ROI or a different type of ROI or something else. So you need to invest or fix or launch new. And you have to make the decision of, cool, do I invest more in my Google Ads this month? Or do I invest more into fixing the um, the marketing process or the lack thereof on our SEO, right? Even though we have a website. Or do I need to launch a new campaign like hiring a community director and doing community outreach in a way that we haven't before? Those are decisions you have to make, because your Google ad person's always going to say, hey, if you give us more budget, we'll do more budget. And that might be the right choice, or that might be the wrong choice. And that's your job as a leader to make this decision.
Yeah. Momentum, guys, is a powerful thing too. When you train your team on how to handle a certain marketing circumstance, so when your intake team learns how to do social media leads or learns how to do things other than referrals, because referrals is like you just have someone at the door and they just write the person's name down and they hand it to the therapist. That's a
Yeah.
referral. Yes, you want that, but it's not predictable, and that's not how you grow your business.
Yeah.
Uh,
An
the
easy heuristic for some of this, we've talked in other pieces about the red, green, yellow framework of evaluating your marketing. But a good indication is like if your marketing's in the green, like your ads, for instance, that's an indication of go, spend more on that channel. If it's in the yellow, I mean, something's working, but it's not fully there. That's an indication that great, we should probably spend the money or time to fix. If it's in the red, that's probably where we need to understand, okay, do we need to rebuild, relaunch, or try a different strategy? We just need to evaluate it on a deeper level based off of the level of performance.
Yeah, I like that.
Two skills left. Attilio, what's number seven?
Number seven, guys, we're talking about adapting investment strategies based on the market shifts. So occasionally there's going to be shifts in the marketplace that will require your adjustments. And this is going to require a little bit of intuition and a lot of filtering out noise. Okay. So if you just hop into a random Facebook group for therapists, you are going to hear the squabblings of everything. The world is burning. No practices are getting intakes. Everyone is failing right now. And that is not the truth. Okay. Even in the worst moments, there are people who are succeeding and finding success, which means that you can too. And so, one, tune that out or completely cut it off as far as like a news source for yourself. And what you really need to pay attention to is customer feedback, like clients that are coming in that are saying things have changed, or reports that like some big legal events are happening that are maybe completely out of your control. And I think legal and out of control maybe go hand in hand here. And this is like COVID happened. Like the pandemic was an issue that severely changed how people interacted with your team and your staff. And I think if you have your ear to the ground, you hear that from your clientele, right? They're like, hey, can you guys, like, I don't want to come in person anymore. Like, I think we should try to do this remote thing. And you're like, oh, people want remote now, probably because of this event. So listen to your clients, listen to your customer base, listen to feedback from your therapist. There has to be some kind of upward swing of information so that you can make these these adjustments accordingly. And then I think just being innovative in your approach and being open to changing how you've done things. So if you're
Yeah.
open to changing how you've done things, if you're open to tackling some of these new, some new changes, that will help you understand where maybe you need to upregulate some elements of your marketing strategies and downregulate some other strategies. During the
Yeah.
pandemic, you probably wouldn't have done networking more. People just weren't interested in it, right? It was a really difficult time to do a lot of networking during that time period. But maybe running something like Google Ads more then would have been really, really productive because people were sitting at home needing help still. So the need doesn't just go away, right? Just because there's a pandemic doesn't mean that people want to stop their therapy sessions. So the need doesn't go away fundamentally, but how they approach the service is
Yeah.
different, and that will need adjustments.
I bet that if you had a larger group practice, this is a strategy that works better if you probably have like, I don't know, 10 plus therapists. But like right away, the first couple months of the pandemic, if you had done a large community direct mail campaign, because everyone's at home, they aren't going anywhere, probably would have been incredibly productive if you were advertising virtual therapy for whatever your topics and niche sets are. And that's just the thing is markets change, but then marketing productivity happens in cycles. And all that means is people move to one channel, they move to another channel, they spend more, and like what becomes popular, and then what works changes, and then the crowd comes, and then this process, right? So you just have to think through this process. Great, am I buying in an overpopulated space? Or do I need to go bargain hunt and do a little bit more work so I can get the success and the results at a cheaper place? So, skill number 8. Let's round this all out and wrap this all together. Bottom line, you have to budget for marketing setbacks. You have to budget for marketing setbacks. And this is a little bit like the equivalent of having an emergency fund for your business and for your personal life. If you don't have an emergency fund, it can really screw you over down the road because you put something on the credit card and most of us have probably been there, and then we pay more interest and then it costs us, right? It's like same with business. You make a mistake and you don't have the bandwidth to go through it. And yeah, that's all true. I think a little bit of like, great, do we have extra money to spend? But I think when you hear SEO takes 18 months to do, when you hear Google Ads takes 3 months to get great results from, when you hear fill in the blank time frame, that is under the assumption that everything else is lined up to make that particular piece happen successfully. And sometimes that is the case, and sometimes those numbers align perfectly. I think of a practice, they've done so much legwork headed into the new year to launch a new location, and they've brought on more than 60 new clients in the first couple weeks with a mix of ads and other marketing measures, and everything hit maturity exactly how they wanted to in the time frame they expected, we expected, and other pieces there. Great. Stars for everyone, right? And then there's other practices, right? We're 3 months in, and through doing the work, we've uncovered item after item after ever. If you ever done a home inspection, right, during your 30-day period to buy a house, and you're like, well, typically this takes 30 days from inspection to close. However, if you start to go through the house and on the surface, everything lines up and you go top to bottom and you find 17 things that need to be fixed and amended that you cannot sign for the house before that's taken care of, well, it's probably going to delay that process and it's going to cause a lot of chaff. That is what happens and why marketing budgets set that, because sometimes you don't know where the landmines are until you start to do the work.
Yeah, I always say that we have the best job as a marketing service provider in that we get to just open up the can of worms in a business. Usually, when you start spending on marketing, that's like the business is overexerting themselves more than what they have been, and it's testing their staff completely because they're now getting a bunch of new work that they have to do, and they have to be able to handle it and resolve the
Yeah.
marketing work on the back end. And so it just brings up, and marketing is like actually the lifeblood, right, of a practice. And so it opens up so many cans of worms. And I think a good, healthy way to look at this is if your practice has no idea what it's doing when it comes to marketing and intakes from new marketing, maybe this will take you 2 or 3 times the amount of money and energy to just take and implement. Now, if you're a high level executor and you have good staff that knows the product, knows your team, knows the system, knows everything, maybe the process gets shrunk significantly. But especially if you've never done something before, or especially, I'll give you guys even the opposite side of this. If you've worked with 6 other companies and they've all failed mysteriously, maybe that's you, right? And so I think you have to look at this a couple ways. Have we ever received or have we ever found success doing some type of marketing work? Is my staff adequate and appropriate to be able to handle a new volume, new work? There's a lot of things that go into this that's just you wrap it into this marketing budgeting because all of a sudden it takes you 2 extra months than you thought and you're gasping for air because you're like, well, I was hoping that it was going to work a little bit faster. And the truth is that there's a lot that has to come together to really make one successful strategy solid, to the point where you can just look at it and say, this is objectively working. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of strings that all have to be pulled all together. And that has to be wrapped into your budgeting.
It's tough if your business is a tree and marketing is over there digging a well so that way you can get to the water to water your tree. Well, if digging your well isn't going very well, then your tree kind of dies in the vine. It's hot out. We understand. We've certainly been there where things are not going well and you're trying to grow at the speed of cash. You're trying to get marketing to work and you're just gasping for air, as Attilio just said. And that's a really tough. Keep a level head, learn from the lessons, use marketing as a mirror to see if there's other parts of the business that don't align with the things that need to be lined up to get marketing to work well for you. And keep going. The only way is through. Go and examine each one of these skills, figure out which one you're probably breaking down or not spending any time either learning or implementing, especially if it's the cash conversion cycle or the ROI piece of things. And then we have, upcoming both workshops and programs that dig into the relationship between what marketing is actually working this year and then some of these pieces. And so if you want more context beyond just the skills of financial success, go to mytherapyflow.com or check relevant links around. We'd happy to work with you guys on bringing some of these pieces to life.
Best of luck. We'll see you all next time.